Alright guys, in today's video we're going to be doing the 5 cheapest iPhones that you can buy. So let's go ahead and get started. So if you're on a budget, you want an iPhone, this video should be helpful. So the iPhone 7 is one of my favorite iPhones. I still think this is a really great phone. It comes in at around $188 right now, and you can find it a little cheaper on eBay, but I like the iPhone 7's design. It's one of my favorite feeling phones as well, and it's a very compact phone for today's standard. You have an aluminum back, aluminum frame on here. Feels really solid in the hands. IP67 dust and water resistant as well, so you can get it wet and it won't break immediately. And this phone has a 4.7-inch Retina IPS display. It's a 720p plus display, 326 for the PPI. Very compact, so the design is fine on here. I mean, Apple released the SE 2020, which we'll talk about later, with the same design. So a lot of people, a lot of iPhone fans don't really care. Now, to me, it does look a little bit dated from the front at least, but overall, I found the screen quality to be just fine for a display that was this size. I didn't really notice pixels. It was pretty bright as well. So overall, if you're a compact phone lover, then you'll really like this phone. One of the best things about this phone is that you're actually running the latest version of iOS 14.2, along with the Apple A10 Fusion chip. And this phone is still blazing fast, especially with iOS 14. You're not missing anything. You have the widgets and all of that. And this is also a pretty good gaming device as well. Most games it pretty much killed. It was able to play them on high, I think, except for like Fortnite, but PUBG, Call of Duty all ran just fine. I have a full gaming test if you guys want to see that. Of course, you have no SD card support with iPhones. You do get 32 gigs of internal storage and 2 gigs of RAM. The internal storage is a little bit low, so do note that you might want to use the cloud if you take a lot of photos and videos. So this phone, remember, does not have the headphone jack as well, and you do have stereo speakers on this phone, which actually are pretty loud and have a pretty good depth with the bass, pretty good mids and highs. So I was pretty impressed with the stereo speakers on this phone actually. You do have just one single 512 megapixel camera, does shoot in 4K, and you do have a 7 megapixel selfie camera. Overall, I found the cameras to be pretty good for a phone that is under 200 bucks. Is pretty much on par, or even sometimes I like it a little bit more than some budget phones these days. Now, the front-facing camera is really good as well, so it'll be great for FaceTime if you're worried about that. I still found it to be fine. And overall, detail is fine. A dynamic range is fine. The camera is not going to blow you away. It does show its age compared to the newer ones, but overall, I found the image quality to be fine on the iPhone 7, and video is also, again, super solid with these iPhones as well. So of course, you get Apple Pay with this phone, so you will be able to use your device to pay for things. And the physical fingerprint scanner on the front, or Touch ID, works flawlessly on this phone. Very fast, and actually is really good these days because of wearing the mask and stuff like that. So battery life is where this phone kind of falls short. It's a 1060 milliamp battery. For me, I can get like 4 hours of screen on time. I did a drain test with this phone, depending on how you use it. So if you're more of a light user, you're not on full brightness, maybe you can get a little bit more, but this is definitely a phone you're going to be charging. Alright, next is the iPhone X. This is my personal favorite on the list because of the price to spec ratio. You can find this for around $377 on Amazon. All links will be down below, and of course on eBay the prices can always get cheaper. But this phone is super solid. I really love this phone. So you have a really nice design. It's a glass back and a stainless steel frame on here. It feels super solid in the hand. It doesn't look too far off from the newer iPhones with the design. And since this is an older phone, you gotta remember this came out in 2017, so it still looks really good. It's IP67 dust and water resistant as well. It's got the Super Retina OLED display, which is something I love. It's HDR10, and that's one of the things I really like about this phone, because if you remember with the iPhone 11, it had an IPS display. This one has an OLED display, and it just looks really good. It's a 5.8-inch display. It's 1125 by 2430 436 and 458 for the PPI. Overall, just a really nice looking display. Very good deep blacks, very punchy colors on this display. Overall, I was really happy with it. Of course, you've got the big notch on this phone, but it pretty much looks like any other iPhone, yeah, even the newer ones, right from the front. So you do have iOS 14.2 in the Apple A11 chip. This phone is very fast when it comes to just navigating iOS, especially with iOS 14. It just made the phone even snappier. And you also have pretty good gaming support on this phone. You can play games just fine, no problems. Again, I have a gaming test on this phone as well. So if you're trying to do gaming on here, this phone would definitely kill it. Of course, you don't have any SD card support. The base storage is 64 gigs and 3 gigs of RAM, so do note that. You do have on here some really good sounding stereo speakers as well. Very good bass presence with the speakers, and you have good mids and highs, so I was really happy with the speakers on here. Of course, you have your NFC, and of course this phone has the Face ID, which honestly is very fast. I didn't notice a difference from this in an iPhone 11. It was pretty spot on with speed here. Now this phone also has Apple Pay, of course, so you have NFC on board. Now you do have very good cameras on here. I think for the $400 price point, I think you have super solid cameras. So a 12 megapixel standard, a 12 megapixel telephoto, you get 4K video at 24, 30 or 60 FPS, along with a 7 megapixel selfie camera that shoots in 1080p. Overall dynamic range is really good. Color is very vibrant and pops on the iPhone X. You also have really good detail as well. Depth of field is pretty good. Overall, the iPhone X cameras, it is really good. Now video is super solid on this phone as well, so again, for FaceTime and stuff like that, it'll be great for that. So this is just an overall super solid phone. Now you do have way better battery life on this phone than the 7. Now you have a 2716 milliamp battery. You have fast charging and wireless charging on board with this phone. Now you get around 6 hours of screen on time with this phone. Now depending on your battery health, that could vary, but overall I'm usually able to get through a full day with this phone, and then you have the charger by the end of the day. But it's pretty solid on battery life for me if you're a light user. So the iPhone 8 is next, and it's going for around 240, 250. So if you kind of wanted the 7 but you wanted something a little bit more powerful, then you would get the iPhone 8. And I do think the iPhone 8 has slightly better cameras than the iPhone 7, but not by a ton. But there's very little difference between the 7 and 8 besides the slight power increase. But the design is a little bit different. You have a glass back, and you also have an aluminum frame on here. Basically it's pretty much the same design as the 7. It's just a glass back. It's IP67 dust and water resistant as well. You have the same IPS retina display. It's 720p plus 326 for the PPI. Same exact display, looks the same. Pretty good colors. You can't see any pixels, fairly bright. It runs iOS 14. The difference with this phone is you have the Apple A11 chip instead of the A10 chip. So this phone is going to be overall snappier over time. It should get longer software support than the iPhone 7 as time progresses. So that is something also to consider. Is if you want this phone, you will get more updates than I guess an iPhone 7 would. So you do have 64 gigs of internal storage and 2 gigs of RAM on here. Again, I found the phone to be overall pretty good with performance. Gaming on this phone is pretty good as well with the A11 chip. I found gaming you can play on high settings with most games. You also have NFC support on here. The same fingerprint scanner as well, works very fast. Touch ID. This phone has excellent camera on here as well. It's a 12 megapixel standard, a 4K video, 24, 30 or 60 FPS, 7 megapixel selfie. Now the cameras aren't too much different from the 7 and 8, but you will notice a slight improvement, especially with dynamic range and detail. That is like the main thing, but overall image quality is pretty much the same. It's going to be a pretty good camera, and again, it's a single lens, so nothing too crazy going on with this phone. Video is super solid on here as as well. You get punchy colors, good depth of field. Overall, it's a basic camera that takes pretty good photos. So you do have a slightly bigger battery as well. It's a 1821 milliamp battery. You do have wireless charging on board too, and battery life is a little bit better on the iPhone 8. You can definitely get through a day if you're a light user. So coming from the 7 and then using the 8, you will definitely notice the slight speed improvement. Battery life is a little bit better, and also you will get updates a little bit more than on the 7 over time. Alright guys, so next is the iPhone SE 2020. So this phone comes in at around 400 bucks. You can find it a little bit cheaper on locked carriers and stuff like that. I saw on eBay, but if you want it unlocked, it'll be around that price point. So this phone is pretty interesting when it first came out because it keeps the same exact design of the iPhone 8, but it just upgrades the internals a little bit. So you do have, again, the same design. It's aluminum framed glass back, is IP67 dust and water resistant. The same display, it's a 4.7 inch retina display, 720p plus, 326 for the PPI. Same exact display, same bezel, all that stuff. That was kind of like the thing with this phone, was that they recycled the design. Now of course you have the latest version of iOS, but the big thing with this phone, so if you're a fan of like the compact phone design, but you want it, it just to be more powerful, then the Apple A13 chip is a beast on this phone. I mean, this phone is blazing fast, does not miss a beat when it comes to performance. It's just really fast. Whatever you're doing on this phone, whether it's gaming, you're doing it on high settings, it just blows through iOS like a breeze. So if you want something like an iPhone 8 but with newer internals and you really like that older design, then this phone is going to be great. So you have 64 gigs of internal storage and 3 gigs of RAM on here. You have the same sounding speakers to me. They have really good depth of bass. I didn't have an issue, especially with a phone this size. It sounded really good. So you do have Apple Pay, of course, on here. Touch ID is on here as well. And the best thing about this phone is a camera. So if you want a cheap phone with a great camera, then this is one of the best this year. So you have a 12 megapixel standard and that shoots in 4K, and a 7 megapixel selfie that shoots in 1080p. The camera software is excellent on this phone. It just takes some really good photos. It can rival even some flagships. So you just get really good color, good dynamic range, depth of field. I love everything about these cameras at this price point. Pretty good detail. Now the only like downside is there's no ultra wide, no depth sensor, macro. It's just this one lens, but overall you can get a really good shot. It's great for FaceTime too. Video is awesome on this phone as well. So for cameras, this is a really good phone too. I think it's definitely a little bit better than even the iPhone X. That's the favorite on my list. So you do have a 1821 milliamp battery, and you have wireless charging on board as well. Battery life is pretty solid on the SE 2020. Not amazing. I can get through pretty much a day with this phone. I think I can get like 5 hours of screen on time. Again, I'm a light user, so you can get through a day of battery life with this phone, no problem. So overall, it's a pretty good pick. Alright, last on the list is the iPhone XS. What a lot of people don't know is this phone came down in price. It used to be like around $500. Now it's right around $399 on Amazon refurbished. This is the best, buy on the list, in my opinion. Of course, it's going to be a little bit pricier than the iPhone X that I really like, because that's like only like 360, 370. But this is 400 even, and I think this is super solid deal. So you pretty much get the same design as the iPhone X, stainless steel glass back. You get IP68 dust and water resistant on this phone. You get the same super retina display on here. It's an OLED display, HDR10, 5.8 inches. 1125 by 2436, the same display as the iPhone X. I can't really notice a real difference with the displays on here. You do get the latest version of iOS, of course. The big difference is the Apple A12 chip. So if you were wanted a phone that down the road will definitely get software updates for years and years to come, this is like the best bet. It's the most powerful, one of the most powerful phones on the list besides the SE 2020. You do have the Apple A12 chip, like I said, great gaming performance on here. So performance wise, you're going to be super solid, ready to go play games on high. You do get 64 gigs of internal storage and 4 gigs of RAM. Now the cameras on here are pretty close to the SE2020. That's a 12 megapixel standard and a 12 megapixel telephoto with 4K video. So you do get that extra lens for 400 bucks, which is something that I really like. The selfie camera is really good as well. It's a 7 megapixel shooter, and photo quality is pretty much on par with the SE2020. So you also get that extra lens, like I said, so good detail, good dynamic range. The colors there, I kind of wish it came with the ultra wide lens. I think that would have been better, but overall you're getting a really good camera still with the iPhone XS. It's really good. So you also get, you know, Face ID, which works very fast. I didn't really notice a huge difference from that in the iPhone X, honestly, but you do get, in my opinion, better battery life on the iPhone XS. It's a 2658 milliamp battery. Wireless charging is on board. You can easily get through a day of battery life with this phone, for me, especially if you're a light user. So overall, just a solid phone. Be sure to let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.